Welcome. I'm Magnus, and I bring you horror stories to help you relax, or maybe to keep you up at night. Tell us where you're from. Are there spooky forests nearby? If you're a fan of scary stories, subscribe and drop a like. Get cozy, and let's begin. My name is Thaddeus Blackwell, 34 years old, and I've always been the type to question everything. That's probably what led me to sell my condo in Louisville and purchase 5 acres of dense woodland in eastern Kentucky. The isolation was exactly what I needed, a break from society's constant noise and demands. I'd built a modest cabin with my own hands, installed solar panels, dug a well, and figured I was set for the quiet life I'd been craving. The first month was everything I'd hoped for. Peaceful mornings with coffee on my porch, watching deer graze at the edge of the clearing. I'd spend my days chopping wood, tending to my small garden, or hiking the surrounding hills. My nearest neighbor, Elijah, lived about 2 miles away, an older man who'd been off-grid for nearly 20 years. He'd stop by occasionally, bringing fresh eggs from his chickens, or just to chat about practical matters of wilderness living. "You picked a strange spot," Elijah mentioned during one of his visits, his eyes darting nervously toward the ridge beyond my property. "Most locals avoid these parts." When I pressed him for details, he muttered something about strange folks who'd settled deeper in the woods years ago. I laughed it off. Every rural area had its local legends and superstitions. I thought it was just the typical wariness country people have toward those who choose isolation. One evening, while foraging for mushrooms farther from my cabin than usual, I discovered something disturbing. A small clearing with what appeared to be a crude altar made of stacked stones. Around it, strange symbols had been carved into several trees. My skin crawled as I examined them. Nothing I recognized from any folklore or religious tradition I knew. Hanging from branches were small bundles of twigs bound with what looked like human hair. A sick feeling settled in my stomach. I took photos with my phone, intending to ask Elijah about them later. As I turned to leave, I noticed something that made my blood freeze, a fresh footprint in the soft earth that definitely wasn't mine. Someone had been here recently, perhaps even watching me. The unsettling thought made me hurry back to my cabin, constantly glancing over my shoulder. The woods suddenly seemed darker, the shadows deeper and more threatening. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the cabin, every rustle outside my windows sent my heart racing. Around 2 a.m., I heard what sounded like singing, distant, atonal voices chanting in harmony. I told myself it was just the wind, or maybe some strange acoustical effect carrying sounds from far away. But deep down, I knew better. I pulled the curtains tight and double-checked my locks. The next morning, I hiked to Elijah's place, eager to show him the photos and ask about what I'd found. As I approached his cabin, I noticed something was off. His usually tidy yard was strewn with broken items, a shattered lantern, splintered wood, his garden trampled. The door to his cabin hung open, swinging slightly in the breeze. "Elijah," I called out, my voice sounding thin in the morning air. No answer. I stepped inside, calling his name again. The cabin was in disarray, furniture overturned, his few possessions scattered across the floor. In the center of his small kitchen table sat a crude figure made of sticks and bone, identical to the ones I'd seen in the woods. There was no sign of Elijah. On the wall, written in what looked horribly like dried blood, was a single symbol, the same as one I'd photographed the day before. As I backed out of the cabin, phone in hand to call for help, I noticed them. 6 figures standing motionless at the edge of the woods surrounding Elijah's clearing. They wore rough, handmade clothing and had symbols painted on their faces. They didn't move or speak, just watched me with unervingly blank expressions. I ran, faster than I'd ever run before, crashing through the underbrush back toward my own cabin, certain they were following me, though I couldn't hear anything over my own panicked breathing and pounding heart. I spent the rest of the day barricaded in my cabin, jumping at every sound. With shaking hands, I tried calling the county sheriff, but of course, no signal. My satellite internet was down too, which had never happened before. I was completely cut off. The terror that gripped me was primal, something I'd never experienced in my city life. As night fell, I loaded the hunting rifle I'd brought for protection against wildlife, thinking how naive that concern seemed now. Sleep was impossible. Every few hours, I'd hear that same distant chanting, sometimes closer, sometimes farther away, as if they were circling my property. Just before dawn, I glimpsed movement through the window, shadowy figures darting between trees at the edge of my clearing. I counted at least 8 different people, moving with an unnerving coordination. They never approached the cabin directly, just maintained their vigil from the treeline. When morning finally came, the woods were silent again. I decided I had to leave, abandon everything, and get back to civilization. I threw some essentials into my backpack, grabbed my rifle, and headed for my truck. That's when I saw it. All 4 tires slashed to ribbons. My heart sank. The nearest town was 20 miles away through dense forest. Even if I could navigate there on foot, I'd be exposed in the woods for hours. I retreated back to the cabin, my mind racing through increasingly desperate options. I knew I needed more information about who these people were and what they wanted. With trembling hands, I dug through the few books I'd brought with me, searching for anything on local history or folklore. In a guidebook to Kentucky, I found a brief mention of a religious sect that had settled in these mountains in the 1920s, followers of something called the Doctrine of Silent Witnesses. The book said they'd disappeared decades ago, but locals still avoided certain areas of the forest. Was this the same group? Had they been here all along, watching, waiting? That afternoon, I heard a knock at my door that nearly stopped my heart. Peering through a crack in the curtains, I saw a young woman, maybe 25, standing on my porch. She wore normal clothes, not like the figures I'd seen, but something about her eyes seemed wrong. Too wide, too still. "Please," she called out, her voice oddly flat. "I'm lost. I need help." Every instinct screamed danger, but what if she really was just a hiker? Could I leave someone out there with those people? I cracked the door, keeping the chain on and my rifle ready. "Where did you come from?" I demanded, her head tilted at an unnatural angle. "The same place you did," she replied, her lips stretching into a too wide smile. "The world of noise and blindness. But I've been shown the truth. They want to show you too." She thrust her hand through the gap. On her palm was carved the same symbol I'd seen at the altar. I slammed the door shut, my breath coming in gasps as she began to pound on it rhythmically, still smiling. The pounding stopped abruptly. When I dared to look outside again, she was gone, but at the edge of my property, more figures had gathered, at least 15 now. They stood perfectly still, facing my cabin. As the sun began to set, they raised their arms in unison and began that chilling chant again. I realized with growing horror that they were performing some kind of ritual, and I was at the center of it. I spent that night moving between windows, watching their shapes in the moonlight. Sometimes they would approach, placing objects at the edges of my clearing, crude effigies, bundles of sticks, small dead animals arranged in patterns. By morning, my clearing was surrounded by these disturbing offerings. A message left on my property boundaries that couldn't have been clearer. "You are surrounded. You are watched. You are ours." In a moment of desperate clarity, I remembered Elijah mentioning an old logging road that ran behind his property. It was overgrown, but might still be passable on foot. If I could make it to Elijah's and find that road, I might have a chance to reach the highway. I'd have to move at night, when at least some of them might be sleeping. I spent the day gathering supplies, studying my maps, and trying to calm my racing thoughts. As dusk approached, I noticed something that turned my blood to ice, smoke rising from multiple points in the forest. They were setting up camps, settling in. They weren't going to leave. They were waiting me out. I waited until the darkest part of night, when the moon had set and even the cult members' fires had died down to glowing embers. With my backpack, rifle, and a crude map I'd drawn, I slipped out through my bedroom window, the only one not visible from their positions. The night air felt heavy with menace as I crept along the edge of my property, staying low and moving slowly to avoid making noise. Every snap of a twig under my feet sounded like a gunshot in the stillness. I'd almost reached the tree line when I heard it, a low whistle, then an answering one from another direction. They had sentries posted. Of course they did. I froze, pressing myself against the trunk of a massive oak, hardly daring to breathe. A flashlight beam swept through the darkness about 30 yards to my right. I could make out the silhouette of someone moving methodically through the undergrowth. They were hunting for me, and with chilling efficiency. Abandoning stealth for speed, I ran, crashing through the forest in what I hoped was the direction of Elijah's cabin. Behind me, shouts erupted, and more whistles pierced the night. The forest came alive with moving lights and the sounds of pursuit. My lungs burned and branches whipped at my face as I fled, blind with terror. I had no idea if I was even heading in the right direction anymore, just away from them. After what felt like hours, I stumbled into a creek and decided to follow it downhill, hoping it would lead to a road or at least throw off my pursuers. The cold water numbed my feet as I splashed downstream, slipping on mossy rocks. That's when I saw it, a structure looming ahead in the darkness. Not Elijah's cabin, but something much larger. An old church or meeting hall, its windows dark, its wooden siding rotted with age. Above the door, barely visible in the gloom, was that same symbol I'd seen carved into trees and on the young woman's palm. I should have run the other way, but I could hear the cult members getting closer, calling to each other through the woods. In desperation, I ducked inside the building, hoping to hide until they passed. The interior was a nightmare, pews arranged in a circle around a central altar stained dark with what could only be decades of dried blood. The walls were covered with the symbols, carved deep into the wood, and hanging from the rafters were dozens of those same twig effigies I'd seen, swaying slightly in the draft from the open door. Backing away in horror, I bumped into something that swung with the impact. Turning slowly, I found myself face to face with Elijah, or what remained of him. His body hung from a beam, but it wasn't a simple hanging. His chest had been cut open, emptied, and filled with twigs and stones arranged in specific patterns. His eyes had been replaced with smooth river pebbles. His mouth was stuffed with what looked like pages from a book. A silent scream preserved for eternity. I bit down on my hand to keep from screaming, tasting blood as my teeth broke skin. I heard them then. Footsteps on the porch outside, the murmur of voices. I ducked behind the altar, pressing myself into the darkness, clutching my rifle. The door creaked open wider, and several hooded figures entered, carrying lanterns that cast grotesque shadows against the walls. They were speaking to each other in a language I'd never heard, guttural and rhythmic, with words that seemed to hurt my ears somehow. I could feel blood trickling from my nose as they chanted, a pressure building in my head like it might explode. Their leader, I assumed he was the leader from his more elaborate robes, approached the altar and placed something on it that made my stomach lurch. My wallet. They'd been in my cabin while I hid here. He opened it and removed my driver's license, holding it up in the lantern light. Thaddeus Blackwell, he said, pronouncing my name with reverent care. The witness has chosen you. Be honored. The others repeated my name in that same reverent tone, over and over, like a prayer. I don't know what made me do it, terror, rage, or just the primal instinct to survive, but I stood up from my hiding place, raised my rifle, and fired at the leader. The gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space. He staggered backward, blood blooming on his robes, but he didn't fall. Instead, he looked down at his wound with mild curiosity, then back at me, his face splitting into that same unnatural smile I'd seen on the woman. The witness embraces your defiance, he said, his voice unchanged despite the bullet in his chest. It makes the witnessing sweeter. As one, the group moved toward me, arms outstretched, faces alight with that terrible reverence. I fired again and again, the rifle's recoil bruising my shoulder as I backed toward a side door I'd spotted. 2 more cultists fell, but the others kept coming, unfazed by the deaths of their companions. Their eyes reflected the lantern light like animals. When my rifle clicked empty, I swung it like a club, connecting with a hooded figure's head. The crunch was sickening, but it bought me precious seconds to fumble with the rusted latch on the side door. It gave way suddenly, and I tumbled backward into the night. Outside, I could see more lanterns moving through the trees, converging on the church. There had to be 30 or more of them. How had they lived out here undetected for so long? I sprinted away from the building, no longer caring about direction or stealth, just desperate to put distance between myself and that blood-soaked altar. The forest floor sloped downward, becoming steeper until I was half running, half sliding down a ravine, grabbing at saplings to slow my descent. My foot caught on an exposed root, and I crashed to the ground, tumbling and rolling until I slammed into something hard. Stars exploded behind my eyes, and for a moment, I thought I might pass out. When my vision cleared, I realized I'd hit an old rusted car, almost completely reclaimed by the forest. Crawling inside, I found keys still in the ignition. Someone had abandoned it here decades ago. It wouldn't start, of course, but it provided momentary shelter while I caught my breath and tried to orient myself. The glove compartment contained an ancient map and a flashlight that, miraculously, still worked, though its beam was weak. The map showed I was near the border of what was labeled Witness Hollow, a name that sent chills down my spine. Beyond it was a state highway, maybe 5 miles away. If I could reach it by daybreak, I might flag down a passing car. I checked my watch, 3:30 a.m. I had maybe 3 hours until dawn. I just crawled out of the car when I heard it, a sound that didn't belong in the forest. A child's laughter, high and musical, coming from the darkness ahead. I froze, my flashlight beam probing the shadows. "Hello," I called softly, against my better judgment. The laughter came again, followed by the sound of small feet running away. Was it possible there were children here? Innocent victims of this cult? Every instinct told me to ignore it, to keep moving toward the highway, but something pulled me forward. I followed the sound deeper into the woods, my flashlight catching glimpses of what looked like a small figure darting between trees. "Wait," I called. "I can help you." The figure stopped finally, standing still beside a large boulder. As I approached, my light illuminated not a child, but a crude mannequin made of sticks and cloth, with a small tape recorder tied to it, the source of the laughter. Too late, I realized my mistake. The ground gave way beneath me, a concealed pit, its edges sharp with wooden stakes. I managed to catch the edge with one arm, dangling above what would have been certain death. As I struggled to pull myself up, hands reached down to grasp mine, not helping, but prying at my fingers. Above me, silhouetted against the night sky, were 3 hooded figures, working methodically to break my grip. With a desperate surge of strength, I swung my free arm up and grabbed one of them by the ankle, yanking hard. The cultist lost balance and plummeted past me into the pit, the scream cut short by a wet thud. In the confusion, I hauled myself up and over the edge, scrambling away on all fours. The remaining cultists gave chase, but their robes hampered them in the dense undergrowth. I had one advantage, absolute terror making me faster than I'd ever been. I ran until my legs gave out, collapsing behind a fallen tree to catch my breath. Dawn was approaching, the eastern sky lightening to gray. I could see better now, make out landmarks. In the distance, through a break in the trees, I spotted something that made my heart leap: power lines. They had to lead to a road. I forced my exhausted body to move, stumbling toward them with renewed hope. The trees began to thin, and suddenly I was standing at the edge of the forest, looking down at a 2-lane highway. Empty now in the pre-dawn light, but a road nonetheless. Civilization. Safety. I nearly wept with relief as I half ran, half staggered down the embankment. My plan was simple: follow the road until I reached a house or a car passed by. Then I'd call the police, report what had happened to Elijah, what was still happening in those woods. As the sun broke over the horizon, I heard the blessed sound of an engine approaching. I stood in the middle of the road, waving my arms frantically. The pickup truck slowed to a stop, and the driver, an older man in a flannel shirt, rolled down his window. "You look like you've been through hell, son," he said, his face creased with concern. I started to explain, the words tumbling out in a frantic jumble, when I noticed something that stopped me cold. Hanging from his rearview mirror was a small twig effigy, identical to those in the church. The man's concerned expression melted into that now familiar reverent smile. "The witness sent me to find you," he said softly. I bolted into the woods on the opposite side of the highway, the man's calm voice calling after me. "You can't escape the witness, Thaddeus. No one ever has." I crashed through underbrush, my body running on nothing but adrenaline now. How far did their influence reach? Were they in the towns too? My mind raced with horrific possibilities as I pushed deeper into unfamiliar territory, the rising sun providing little comfort. After what felt like hours, I stumbled onto a dirt access road and followed it to a small cluster of maintenance buildings for the nearby state park. The padlock on a shed had rusted through, allowing me to break in and collapse on the concrete floor, hidden among lawn equipment and bags of fertilizer. I must have passed out from exhaustion because when I opened my eyes again, the light filtering through the dirty windows had the golden quality of late afternoon. My body was a catalog of pain, cuts, bruises, and what felt like a cracked rib screaming for attention now that the adrenaline had worn off. But I was alive and temporarily safe. I took stock of my situation. No phone, no weapon, no food or water. But in the shed, I found a few useful items: a crowbar, work gloves, a half-empty bottle of water left by a park employee. I drank sparingly, knowing I needed to make it last. As dusk approached, I noticed something that gave me hope. A park map tacked to the wall showed I was only 2 miles from the ranger station. If I could make it there, surely I'd find help, a phone, someone official who wasn't part of this nightmare cult. I waited until full dark, then set out following the access road, the crowbar clutched in my hand like a lifeline. The ranger station appeared through the trees, a small building with a single light burning in the window. I approached cautiously, years of city life making me wary of seeming too much like a dangerous vagrant. Through the window, I could see a woman in a ranger uniform at a desk, radio equipment behind her. Normal. Safe. I almost sobbed with relief as I knocked on the door. The ranger, her nameplate read M. Jenkins, took one look at my battered state and ushered me inside, asking rapid-fire questions as she handed me a bottle of water and a first aid kit. I told her everything, about my cabin, Elijah, the cult, their rituals, my escape. As I spoke, her expression changed from concern to skepticism to something harder to read. When I finished, she picked up her radio. "I need to call this in," she said, her voice carefully neutral. I nodded, slumping in relief. Help was coming. "Unit 14 to dispatch," she said into the radio. "I have a 10-91V at Station 6. Subject appears disoriented and is making claims about Witness Hollow." My blood froze at those words. How did she know that name? I hadn't mentioned it. The radio crackled with a response. "Copy, Unit 14. Is the subject contained?" The ranger's eyes never left mine as she replied, "Affirmative. The witness has brought him to us." I lunged for the door, but she was faster than she looked, blocking my path with surprising strength. "The witnessing only hurts if you fight it," she said, her voice gentle, almost kind. Just like Elijah fought. Just like all the others who came to these woods thinking they could take what doesn't belong to them. From her desk drawer, she removed what looked like an antique syringe filled with dark liquid. "This will make it easier. You'll still be you, mostly, when it's done. Just quieter, more aware." In desperation, I swung the crowbar, catching her across the shoulder. She staggered back with a cry of pain, the syringe flying from her hand and shattering on the floor. I didn't wait to see more. I ran out the door and into the darkness, her shouts and the sound of a whistle piercing the night behind me. More whistles answered from the surrounding forest. They were everywhere. I ran blindly, no longer following paths, just pushing through the woods in what I hoped was the direction of the highway again. If I could flag down a car, a real person this time, not one of them, I might still escape. My foot caught in a hidden hole, and I went down hard, pain shooting up from my ankle. Sprained or broken, it didn't matter. I couldn't put weight on it. I dragged myself forward, using the crowbar as a makeshift crutch. The sound of pursuit grew closer, not just from behind, but from all around me. Flashlight beams swept through the trees, and that horrible chanting started again, louder now, dozens of voices joining together. I pulled myself up against a tree, clutching the crowbar, determined to fight to the end. As the first hooded figures emerged from the darkness, I swung wildly, connecting with one's arm. The others hung back, forming a circle around me, their chanting intensifying. Their leader stepped forward, the same man I'd shot in the church, his robe still stained with blood, though he moved as if uninjured. "The witnessing is not death, Thaddeus Blackwell," he said, his voice carrying over the chanting. "It is transformation. The land chose you the moment you built upon it. We are simply its voice." He gestured, and the others moved in, their hands reaching for me. I fought with the fury of desperation, but there were too many. They pinned me to the ground, their touch strangely gentle despite their strength. The leader knelt beside me, producing a small book bound in what looked disturbingly like human skin. "From one who sees to one who will be seen," he intoned, opening the book. "From one who speaks to one who will be silent. From one who moves to one who will witness." As he began to read words in that painful language, I felt something impossible, the ground beneath me softening, becoming almost liquid. I was sinking into the earth itself, being absorbed by it. The cultist's hands pressed me down, deeper into the yielding soil. The last thing I saw before the dirt closed over my face was the leader's reverent smile and his whispered words, "The land takes what it needs." And now, Thaddeus Blackwell, you are the land. My name is Vanessa Mercer, 29 years old, and after a decade in Chicago's financial district, I was burned out. The constant pressure, the 60-hour weeks, the shallow relationships, I needed something real. When my grandmother passed and left me her remote cabin in rural Kentucky, it felt like the universe was offering me an escape. The property sat on 12 acres of woodland near the Daniel Boone National Forest, completely off-grid with a generator, well water, and enough isolation to heal my frazzled nerves. The cabin needed work, lots of it. Grandmother Ellie hadn't lived there for nearly 5 years before her death, and nature had begun reclaiming its territory. I spent the first month replacing rotted boards, patching the roof, and clearing the overgrown paths. It was exactly the kind of physical labor my desk job body needed, and at night, I'd collapse into bed, muscles aching, but mind quieter than it had been in years. Cell service was spotty at best, and the nearest town, Pineville, was a good 30-minute drive down winding mountain roads. My only regular visitor was Mac, an older man who lived about a mile down the road. He'd been friends with my grandmother and took it upon himself to check on me every few days, bringing freshly butchered meat or vegetables from his garden. "Your grandma was a smart woman," he told me during one visit, his weathered face serious beneath his ever-present cap. "She knew how to live out here, how to respect the land. Make sure you do the same." I nodded, thinking he meant basic conservation principles, not realizing there was a deeper warning in his words. One morning in late October, I woke to find the padlock on my storage shed broken, several tools missing, and boot prints in the soft earth that weren't mine. The violations sent a chill through me. Someone had been on my property while I slept. I searched the perimeter of the clearing, finding where they'd come through the woods from the north. The footprints led to an old logging road I hadn't fully explored yet. I debated driving to town to report the theft, but decided it would be pointless. By the time anyone came out, the trail would be cold. Instead, I reinforced my locks, brought my hunting rifle inside from the shed, and resolved to be more vigilant. That night, strange sounds kept me awake. Not the usual chorus of insects and nocturnal creatures I'd grown accustomed to, but something else. Metallic clangs in the distance, engines revving, voices carrying through the trees, although I couldn't make out words. I told myself it was just hunters setting up camp, or maybe loggers working a night shift, though neither explanation felt right. The next day, I hiked toward where I thought the sounds had come from. About 2 miles from my cabin, the forest opened into a hidden valley I hadn't known existed. What I saw there stopped me in my tracks. A small community of trailers and makeshift structures had been erected, surrounded by a perimeter of stripped cars serving as a crude barrier. Men with rifles patrolled between them. In the center was what looked like a processing operation, tables covered with equipment, propane tanks, chemical containers. Even from a distance, I recognized what I was seeing, a meth lab, and not a small one. I crouched behind a fallen tree, trying to process what I was looking at. This explained the theft of my tools. They were scavenging what they needed from the surrounding area. As I watched, a man emerged from the largest trailer, different from the others. Tall, with long gray hair pulled back in a ponytail, he carried himself with authority. The others deferred to him, stepping aside as he inspected their work. Something about his movements seemed familiar, though I was certain I'd never seen him before. I was so focused on the scene that I didn't hear anyone approach until a twig snapped right behind me. I spun around to find myself face to face with a rail-thin man holding a shotgun. His skin was covered in sores, a meth user as well as a cook. "Well, what do we have here?" he drawled, his yellowed teeth visible in a predatory smile. "Boss," he called over his shoulder. "Got us a spy." My heart hammered against my ribs as more men appeared, surrounding me, their expressions ranging from anger to something far more disturbing, hunger. They marched me down into the valley, the shotgun pressed against my back. The man with the ponytail watched our approach, his face impassive. When we reached him, he studied me for a long moment. his pale blue eyes unsettlingly calm amid the chaos of the camp. "You're Ellie Mercer's granddaughter," he said finally. "Not a question, a statement. I'm Silas Harlan. Your grandmother and I had an understanding. Seems you and I need to come to one as well." Understanding. I managed to choke out, acutely aware of the guns pointed at me from all directions. What kind of understanding could my grandmother have had with? I gestured at the meth operation, the words dying in my throat as Silas's expression darkened. He motioned for the others to lower their weapons and indicated I should follow him to a battered picnic table at the edge of the clearing. My legs trembled as I sat across from him, planning escape routes that all seemed impossible. "Your grandmother wasn't the sweet old lady you think she was," Silas said, lighting a cigarette. "Ellie knew what we were doing here for years. She took her cut to stay quiet and keep others away." He watched my face as the implication sank in. My grandmother, the woman who taught me to identify wildflowers and bake bread from scratch, had been extorting drug dealers? It couldn't be true. "You're lying," I whispered, but uncertainty crept in. Grandmother Ellie had always had more money than her modest pension should have allowed. Silas shrugged. "Believe what you want, but here's how it's going to be. You'll keep to your cabin and your side of the ridge. You won't hike this way, you won't call the police, and once a month, you'll find an envelope with cash under your porch steps. Simple." His tone was matter of fact, like we were discussing property boundaries or weather patterns. When I didn't immediately respond, his eyes hardened. "Or we can burn that cabin to the ground with you in it and make it look like an accident. Plenty of those happen in these woods." Fear and rage warred within me. I had come here to escape, to find peace, not to be threatened by some backwoods meth kingpin. But looking around at the armed men, I knew I had no choice but to appear to agree. I nodded stiffly. "I'll stay away," I said, forcing the words past the lump in my throat. Silas studied me for a long moment, as if gauging my sincerity, then nodded to one of his men. "Carter will escort you back to make sure you don't get lost." The walk back to my cabin was tense, Carter trailing behind me with his rifle ready. He didn't speak, just watched my every move with bloodshot eyes. When my cabin came into view, he finally broke his silence. "Don't get any ideas about running back to the city," he said. "We've got people in town who'd let us know. Nowhere to hide around here." With that ominous warning, he melted back into the forest, leaving me standing alone in my clearing, feeling anything but safe. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every sound outside made me jump, convinced Silas had changed his mind and sent his men to finish me off. By dawn, I'd made my decision. I would leave, but not in panic. I needed to plan carefully. I packed essentials into my SUV, planning to drive to Pineville first, then find a motel in a larger town where I could contact the state police. I couldn't just abandon my grandmother's property to these criminals, but I couldn't face them alone either. I was just about to leave when Mac's truck rumbled up my driveway. One look at my packed vehicle, and his face fell. "You met Silas," he said, not a question. I stared at him in shock. "You knew?" "All this time. Mac wouldn't meet my eyes. Everyone within 20 miles knows Vanessa. We just don't talk about it. Silas owns half the county, pays off the sheriff, the judge, even got his brother-in-law on the state police force. You go running to the authorities, you'll just paint a bigger target on your back." My stomach dropped as the full extent of my isolation hit me. So what? I just live next door to a meth lab and pretend everything's fine. I demanded. Mac sighed heavily. "Your grandma managed it for 15 years. She was smart, took their money but kept evidence as insurance. That's why they never bothered her." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small key. "She gave me this before she died, said to give it to you if you ever ran into trouble with Silas. It opened something in the root cellar." After Mac left, I descended the creaky wooden steps into the dank cellar beneath the cabin. I'd barely used it except to store preserves, never exploring its darkest corners. Following Mac's directions, I found a rusted metal box hidden behind a false panel in the stone foundation. The key slid into the lock with resistance, but it turned, revealing the contents: a USB drive, a handgun with ammunition, and a journal filled with my grandmother's neat handwriting detailing years of Silas's operation, complete with names, dates, and photos. It was a dead woman's insurance policy, enough evidence to bring down Silas's entire network. But it was also a death sentence if they knew I had it. I sat on the cellar floor, the open box in my lap, facing an impossible decision. If I ran, they would assume I knew something and hunt me down. If I stayed and played along, I was complicit in their criminal enterprise, living in constant fear. There had to be a third option, some way to use what my grandmother had left me without getting myself killed in the process. As night fell, I hid the box and its contents in a new location, not in the cabin where they might search, but buried beneath a distinctive rock formation a half-mile into the woods. I memorized the exact spot, then returned to unpack my SUV, making it appear I decided to stay. If I was going to fight back, I needed them to believe I was no threat. I cleaned my grandmother's handgun, loaded it, and kept it with me at all times. Sleep came in fitful bursts that night, my dreams filled with shadowy figures and my grandmother's face, no longer comforting but secretive and strange. The next morning, I awoke to find an envelope tucked under my front door. Inside was $5,000 in cash and a note in cramped handwriting. Smart decision. Stay smart. They had been watching me, had seen me unpack, and thought I'd surrendered. Good. Let them think that while I figured out my next move. I tucked the money into a kitchen drawer, feeling contaminated just touching it. As I moved around the cabin that day, I had the constant, crawling sensation of being observed through the windows, of eyes tracking my every movement from the tree line. 2 weeks passed in uneasy peace. I fell into a routine, tending my garden, making repairs to the cabin, acting as if I'd accepted my situation. Occasionally, I'd glimpse movement at the edge of my property, Silas's men keeping tabs on me, but they didn't approach. I used the time to study my grandmother's journal, learning the sickening details of the operation. It wasn't just meth. Silas was involved in human trafficking too, using the isolated location to hold people before transporting them elsewhere. The depravity detailed in her neat handwriting made me physically ill. The USB drive contained video evidence, footage taken from hidden cameras my grandmother had placed around her property and, somehow, inside some of Silas's buildings. I watched with growing horror as the extent of his crimes became clear. These weren't just small-time criminals. This was an organized operation with connections far beyond these Kentucky hills. My grandmother had been gathering evidence for years, but for what purpose? Why hadn't she gone to the authorities? The last entry in her journal, dated just a month before her death, provided a clue. Federal contact compromised. Starting over. New plan in motion. One morning, I decided to risk a trip to town for supplies, carefully checking to make sure I wasn't followed. In the local hardware store, I felt eyes on me, not Silas's men, but locals. They knew who I was, and likely what was happening on my property. Their expressions ranged from pity to thinly veiled hostility. As I paid for my items, the cashier, an older woman with kind eyes, slipped me a note with my receipt. Church basement. 7 p.m. Was it a trap, or had I found an ally? Curiosity won over caution. That evening, I drove to the small Baptist church on the edge of town. The basement lights were on, and several cars were parked outside, enough activity that my presence wouldn't seem unusual. I slipped in through the side entrance and found a group of about 15 people seated in a circle. They fell silent as I entered, all eyes turning to me. The cashier from the hardware store stood. "This is Ellie's granddaughter," she said simply. A murmur ran through the group. "She needs to know." What unfolded over the next hour shattered any remaining illusions I had about my quiet retreat. Silas Harlan had been terrorizing the county for decades. He'd started as a small-time dealer, but had built an empire through violence and corruption. Those who opposed him had accidents or disappeared. He had judges and police officers on his payroll and informants everywhere. The group in the church basement was what remained of the resistance. People who had lost family members to Silas's operation and were working to bring him down. "Your grandmother was one of us," the cashier, Martha, explained. "She was gathering evidence for a federal case, but our contact in the DEA was killed 6 months ago. We've been stalled since then, afraid to trust anyone new." The pieces clicked into place. My grandmother's journal entries, her unexpected wealth, the insurance policy she'd left behind. She hadn't been taking bribes. She'd been building a case, playing a dangerous game of cat and mouse with Silas for years. A man named Roy, who'd lost his daughter to Silas's trafficking operation, leaned forward. "We've heard rumors they're planning something big, a major shipment coming through next week. If we could document it, get solid evidence to the right people." His voice trailed off, the unspoken question hanging in the air. They wanted my help. They wanted access to my grandmother's evidence and, possibly, my property as an observation point. The risk was enormous, but looking at their faces, people who had suffered under Silas's reign far longer than I had, how could I refuse? I agreed to work with them, sharing what I had found and developing a plan to document the upcoming shipment. As I drove home that night, my headlights cutting through the darkness, I felt both terrified and strangely empowered. For the first time since discovering Silas's operation, I wasn't merely reacting, I was fighting back. The sense of purpose was exhilarating, temporarily overshadowing the danger. That feeling evaporated the moment I turned onto my property and saw lights blazing from my cabin windows. I hadn't left any lights on. I cut my engine and coasted to a stop at the tree line, heart pounding. Through the window, I could see figures moving inside my home. At least 3 men, tearing the place apart. Searching. Had they somehow learned about my grandmother's evidence? About my trip to town? I slid down in my seat, calculating my options. The gun was in my jacket pocket, but I was outnumbered. Running would only confirm their suspicions. As I watched, paralyzed with indecision, the cabin door opened, and Silas himself emerged, his long hair gleaming silver in the porch light. He spoke to the men, his posture radiating anger. Whatever they were looking for, they hadn't found it. Relief flooded through me. The buried box was still safe. But that relief was short-lived as a new figure joined them on the porch. Mac, his head bowed as Silas gripped his arm roughly. My stomach dropped. Had Mac betrayed me, or was he being coerced? I strained to hear their conversation, but they were too far away. Whatever was said, it ended with Silas backhanding Mac across the face, sending the older man sprawling. 2 of Silas's men dragged Mac to a waiting pickup truck and threw him in the back. The others continued to search the grounds around the cabin, flashlight beams sweeping across the clearing. I sank lower in my seat, praying they wouldn't think to check the access road where I was hidden. After what felt like hours, they finally left, the convoy of vehicles disappearing down my driveway. I waited another 30 minutes before cautiously approaching the cabin, gun drawn. The inside was devastating. Furniture overturned, floorboards pried up, walls punched through in places. They had been thorough in their destruction. On my kitchen table, they'd left a message carved deep into the wood. We know. My blood ran cold. What did they know? About the evidence? The meeting? Mac? And what had they done with him? I knew I couldn't stay in the cabin. It wasn't safe anymore. I grabbed essential supplies, my grandmother's journal, and the gun, then slipped back into the forest. There was an old hunting blind about a mile away that my grandmother had mentioned in her notes. A hidden observation post with a clear view of the valley where Silas's operation was centered. It would be uncomfortable, but I could hide there while figuring out my next move. As I made my way through the dark woods, every sound made me flinch, imagining Silas's men closing in around me. The night had never felt so oppressive, so full of malevolent potential. The hunting blind was exactly where my grandmother had described it. A small, camouflage structure tucked into the dense canopy of an ancient oak tree. Accessible only by a rope ladder that could be pulled up behind me, it offered security and a perfect vantage point. Through a narrow viewing slit, I could see much of Silas's compound in the valley below. The blind was surprisingly well equipped. A sleeping bag, non-perishable food, water purification tablets, even a pair of high-powered binoculars. My grandmother had prepared for this possibility long before I ever arrived in Kentucky. I spent that first night huddled in the blind, jumping at every sound, certain Silas's men would find me. By morning, exhaustion won out over fear, and I fell into a fitful sleep. When I woke, the sun was high. I used the binoculars to scan the compound below, noting increased activity, more armed guards, vehicles coming and going. Whatever shipment Roy had mentioned seemed to be imminent. I needed to contact the resistance group, but I had no way to reach them without exposing myself. My decision was made for me when, around dusk, I spotted something that turned my blood to ice. 2 of Silas's men were dragging Mac across the compound, his face bloodied, his legs barely supporting him. They tied him to a post in the center of the clearing, visible to all. A warning. Silas himself emerged from the main building, holding what looked like a hunting knife. Even from this distance, I could see Mac's terror as Silas approached him, saying something to the gathered crowd. I couldn't let this happen. I had the gun, but at this range, I'd never hit Silas without risking Mac's life. I needed to get closer. Leaving most of my supplies in the blind, I descended and moved stealthily through the forest toward the compound, using the growing darkness as cover. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure it would give me away as I crept from shadow to shadow, closing the distance. Mac's strangled cries carried through the trees, spurring me on even as they turned my stomach. At the edge of the clearing, hidden behind a stack of empty chemical barrels, I had a clearer view of the horrific scene. Silas was methodically cutting Mac, not to kill him quickly, but to make him suffer. "This is what happens to traitors," he announced to his assembly. "This is what happens to anyone who thinks they can cross me." Mac's eyes were wild with pain, darting around as if searching for escape or mercy. They fixed on my hiding spot for just a moment. Had he seen me? I couldn't tell, but something in his expression changed. With a strength that seemed impossible given his condition, Mac suddenly lurched forward, breaking one of the ropes that bound him. "Run, Vanessa!" he screamed. "It's a trap." Confusion rippled through me. How could this be a trap if Mac was warning me? Then I felt it, cold metal pressed against the back of my head. "Don't move," a voice whispered. "Carter." He'd been waiting for me, knowing I'd try to save Mac. I'd walked right into their ambush. Carter marched me into the clearing at gunpoint. The assembled crowd parted, faces eager for more entertainment after Mac's torture. Silas turned, his knife dripping red, a smile spreading across his face. "Right on time," he said, as if welcoming me to a dinner party. I was beginning to think our bait wasn't working. Mac hung his head, shame mixing with agony on his battered face. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "They said they'd kill my granddaughter if I didn't help them." Silas circled me slowly, the knife hovering inches from my face. "Your grandmother was a problem for many years," he said conversationally. "Always watching, always collecting her little scraps of evidence. We had an arrangement, though. She stayed quiet, and I let her live. Then she got greedy, thought she could bring me down." He leaned in close, his breath hot against my ear. "Do you know how easy it is to make an old woman's death look natural? A small adjustment to her medication, and peacefully in her sleep she went." Rage surged through me, momentarily eclipsing my fear. "You killed her," I hissed. Silas shrugged. "Business is business. But she was clever. I never found what she was hiding. That's where you come in, Vanessa. You're going to tell me exactly where your grandmother kept her evidence." He pressed the bloody knife against my cheek. "Or I'll start taking pieces of you, just like your friend here." Time slowed as I weighed my options. The gun had been taken from me. The resistance group didn't know where I was. Even if I told Silas about the buried box, he'd kill me as soon as he had what he wanted. My only chance was to stall, to try to create an opportunity for escape. "It's not here," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "It's in a safe deposit box in Louisville. Time-locked. If I don't access it regularly, it goes to the FBI automatically." Doubt flickered across Silas's face. Just a moment's hesitation, but it was enough to tell me he believed it was possible. My grandmother had outmaneuvered him for years. He couldn't be certain what precautions she might have taken. "You're lying," he said, but there was uncertainty in his tone. I doubled down. "Kill me, and everything she collected goes public. Your operation, your political connections, the trafficking, all of it exposed. She set it up months ago, after she suspected you were poisoning her." The gamble bought me a reprieve, however temporary. Silas ordered his men to lock me in one of the trailers while he considered the situation. As they dragged me away, I caught a final glimpse of Mac, still tied to the post, his eyes meeting mine with a mixture of apology and resolve. The message was clear. He didn't expect either of us to survive the night. I was thrown into a small, stifling trailer, the door locked and guarded from outside. The single window was boarded over, leaving me in near darkness. I explored my prison with desperate hands, searching for anything that might serve as a weapon or tool for escape. The space had been cleared of most items, but underneath a built-in bench, my fingers found something unexpected, a loose panel. Prying it open, I discovered a small hollow space containing a satellite phone and a folded note. My grandmother's handwriting leaped out at me. "If you're reading this, you're in the heart of the beast. One call. Make it count." My hands trembled as I turned on the phone, praying it still had battery and signal. Both bars lit up, weak but present. I had one chance to reach help. Not the local police, who were compromised, and not the resistance group, who had no power to help me now. I dialed the number my grandmother had written at the very back of her journal, her federal contact superior, the only person she believed wasn't corrupted. As the phone connected and began to ring, I heard shouts outside, followed by the sound of approaching vehicles. Headlights swept across the boarded window as engines roared into the compound. "This is Assistant Director Lawson," a voice answered. I spoke rapidly, giving him my location and a condensed version of the situation. My grandmother was Eleanor Mercer. She was working with. The line went dead in my hand as the trailer door burst open. Silas stood there, flanked by his men, his expression no longer calm but twisted with fury. Behind him, I could see the cause of the commotion. Black SUVs with tinted windows had entered the compound, disgorging men in tactical gear. Not police, but something else. "You stupid bitch," Silas spat, lunging toward me. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" He grabbed me by the throat, lifting me off my feet. "Those aren't feds out there. That's my competition, the Cortez Cartel. Someone told them about tonight's shipment, and they've come to take it. And you." His grip tightened, cutting off my air. "You're going to die knowing it's your fault." Gunfire erupted outside, the staccato bursts punctuated by shouts and screams. Silas's grip on my throat loosened as an explosion rocked the compound, throwing us both to the floor. "Carter," he shouted, "get the product loaded and get out through the back route." Carter appeared in the doorway, his face ashen. "They've got the road blocked," he reported breathlessly. "We're surrounded." Silas cursed, pulling a handgun from his waistband. "Then we fight our way out." "Bring her," he ordered, nodding at me. "She's our insurance." Carter hauled me to my feet, pressing a gun to my ribs as we followed Silas out of the trailer into chaos. The compound had become a war zone. Silas's men exchanging fire with the cartel members from behind barricades of vehicles and equipment. Bodies already littered the ground, the air thick with gun smoke and the metallic scent of blood. Silas led us toward a building at the rear of the compound, ducking between cover points. "The tunnels," he muttered. "We can still salvage something from this disaster." My mind raced as we moved through the firefight. If these were truly cartel members, not federal agents, I was merely trading one captor for another. But in the chaos, there might be a chance to escape, to disappear into the forest. I watched for my moment, trying to appear compliant as Carter pushed me forward. When a bullet struck the propane tank to our right, sending a fireball into the night sky, I seized my opportunity. In the moment of distraction, I drove my elbow into Carter's solar plexus with all my strength, then twisted away as he doubled over, gasping. I sprinted toward the tree line, zigzagging to make myself a harder target. Bullets kicked up dirt around my feet, but adrenaline propelled me forward. I'd almost reached the safety of the forest when pain exploded in my leg. A bullet had grazed my thigh. I stumbled, but kept moving, crashing into the underbrush and scrambling up the slope on hands and knees. Behind me, I could hear Silas shouting orders, the sound of pursuit growing fainter as the battle for the compound intensified. Using trees for cover, I worked my way up the ridge, each step on my injured leg sending shards of pain through my body. My only goal was distance, get as far from the compound as possible. The sounds of the gunfight faded as I pushed deeper into the forest, using the moon's faint light to navigate. I needed to reach my grandmother's hunting blind, where I'd left supplies, or better yet, find my way back to my cabin to retrieve the buried evidence. After what felt like hours of painful progress, I emerged from the trees near a familiar landmark, a lightning-struck oak that I recognized from my hikes. I was about a mile from my cabin, but in my weakened state, it might as well have been 100. Blood had soaked through my jeans around the bullet wound, and dizziness washed over me in waves. I needed to rest, just for a moment. I slumped against the tree trunk, trying to gather my strength, when I heard it. The snap of a twig, the rustle of movement. "I always knew you'd be trouble, just like your grandmother." Silas's voice came from the darkness to my right. He emerged into a patch of moonlight, his silver hair matted with blood from a wound on his forehead, his clothes torn and dirty. He'd lost his men, but not his gun, which was pointed steadily at my chest. "The cartel got what they came for. My operation is finished. 20 years of work, destroyed in one night." His voice was oddly calm, detached. as if he were discussing a minor business setback rather than the violent end of his criminal empire. I pressed my back against the tree, searching for a weapon, an escape route, anything. "It's over, Silas," I said, playing for time. "The feds will be all over this place by morning. Even if you kill me, you can't win." He smiled, a terrible empty expression. "I know, but I can make sure you don't win either. Your grandmother denied me her secrets in life. I won't let her granddaughter escape me in death." As he raised his gun, a shot rang out, but not from Silas's weapon. He staggered, a look of surprise crossing his face as he looked down at the spreading red stain on his chest. Behind him stood Mac, barely upright, holding a rifle with shaking hands. His face was a mask of blood and bruises, but his aim had been true. Silas crumpled to the ground, his gun falling from lifeless fingers. "Mac," I gasped, stumbling toward him as he collapsed to his knees. "How did you?" He shook his head weakly. "Broke free in the chaos. Been tracking you both." His breathing was labored, his injuries clearly severe. "Need to tell you, your grandmother, she was my sister. Never told you. To keep you safe." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. My grandmother's mysterious brother who'd died young. Another lie to protect her family from Silas's reach. "The evidence," Mac whispered, his strength failing. "Use it. Finish what she started." I nodded, tears streaming down my face as I held his hand. "I will. I promise." A faint smile touched his lips before his eyes went vacant, his body slumping against me. I held him as he died. This man I'd barely known, who was the last of my family, who had given his life to save mine. Dawn was breaking by the time I made it back to my cabin, my leg throbbing with each step. The property was deserted, Silas's men either dead in the compound or fled into the hills. I dug up the metal box containing my grandmother's evidence with the last of my strength, then collapsed on the porch, the box clutched to my chest. That's where Martha and the others found me hours later, alerted by the sounds of the gunfight echoing through the valley. The aftermath unfolded like a fever dream. Federal agents swarmed the area, collecting evidence from the compound and taking statements. The assistant director I'd called had indeed dispatched a team, but they arrived too late to prevent the cartel attack. The resulting turf war had done what years of investigation couldn't, destroyed Silas's operation in a single blood-soaked night. I spent 3 days in a hospital in Lexington, my leg wound treated, and my statement taken multiple times by different agencies. They were particularly interested in my grandmother's evidence, which provided the final pieces needed to dismantle what remained of Silas's network. Names of corrupted officials, details of trafficking routes, financial records. It was all there, meticulously documented over years. Assistant Director Lawson personally thanked me, promising that those involved would face justice. "Your grandmother was a brave woman," he told me, sitting beside my hospital bed. "She contacted us years ago, but insisted on gathering evidence her own way. Too independent for her own good." There was something in his tone, respect mixed with frustration, that reminded me painfully of Ellie. We tried to extract her when we suspected her cover was blown, but she refused. Said she had to finish what she started. When I was released, Martha and Roy drove me back to the cabin. The property felt different now, haunted not just by my grandmother's secrets, but by the blood that had been spilled because of them. Yellow police tape still marked areas where evidence had been collected. The forest that had once seemed peaceful now felt watchful, harboring memories of violence in its shadows. "What will you do now?" Martha asked as we stood on the porch, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the clearing. "Sell the place," I said without hesitation. "Go back to Chicago." The decision had crystallized during my hospital stay. This land, beautiful as it was, would never bring me peace. Every tree, every path would remind me of Silas, of Mac, of my grandmother's double life. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of paperwork and packing. I listed the property with a real estate agent in Lexington who specialized in remote homes, emphasizing the seclusion and natural beauty while carefully omitting its bloody history. There was surprising interest, a developer looking to build vacation cabins, drawn by the proximity to the national forest. The offer came in well above asking price. On my last day, I visited the makeshift graves where we'd buried Mac and the other innocent victims of Silas's reign. I'd insisted on laying Mac to rest on my grandmother's property, near a flowering dogwood that had been her favorite spot. Standing there, I finally allowed myself to grieve. For Mac, for the grandmother I thought I knew, for the peace I'd hoped to find in these hills. As I turned to leave, my phone rang. Assistant Director Lawson, his voice tense. "Ms. Mercer, where are you right now?" "At the cabin," I replied, a chill running down my spine at his tone. "Why? Get out. Now." "We've discovered a leak in the department. Someone's been feeding information to what's left of Silas's organization." The urgency in his voice propelled me toward my packed car. "They know you have additional evidence that wasn't in the box, something your grandmother hid separately." "What?" "I don't have anything else," I started, but then froze, remembering the USB drive I'd found in a different hiding spot, one I hadn't mentioned to the authorities because it contained personal journals I hadn't yet reviewed. "They're coming for you, Vanessa. Our nearest team is 30 minutes out. Can you get to town?" I was already in my car, turning the key. "Yes, I'll head straight for the sheriff's office." Despite what I knew about local corruption, it was still the safest public place within reach. "No," Lawson's voice sharpened. "The sheriff is one of them. That's how they've been tracking you. Head for the highway, stay on main roads. We'll intercept you." The line went dead as I accelerated down my driveway, gravel spraying behind my tires. In my rearview mirror, I caught a glimpse of movement at the tree line, a flash of metal, a human shape. They were already here. I floored the gas, the SUV fishtailing as it hit the dirt road. My hands were steady on the wheel, but my mind raced in panic. How had I missed this? What else had my grandmother hidden from me? I made it 2 miles before I saw the roadblock, a pickup truck parked sideways across the narrow mountain road, 2 men standing beside it with rifles raised. I recognized one as the sheriff himself. There was no time to stop, no place to turn around on the winding road with its steep drop-offs. I had seconds to make a decision that would determine whether I lived or died. I accelerated. The men dove out of the way as I crashed through their barricade, the impact deploying my airbags and sending my SUV into a spin. I fought for control, tires screeching on asphalt. For a moment, I thought I'd made it. Then came the sharp crack of gunfire, the rear window exploding inward. Pain bloomed hot and sudden in my back. The steering wheel jerked in my hands as another shot took out my tire. The world tilted and slowed as the SUV broke through the guardrail, momentarily airborne before beginning its tumble down the mountainside. Each impact was a new explosion of pain, metal crumpling around me like paper. Above the cacophony of destruction, one thought remained clear: this was always how it would end. My grandmother had known it. Mac had known it. The mountains kept their secrets, buried their dead, and I would be no exception. As the vehicle came to rest upside down against a massive oak, I felt warmth spreading beneath me, blood pooling from wounds I couldn't see. Through the shattered windshield, I could make out a slice of sky, impossibly blue and peaceful. Sirens wailed in the distance, but they were too far away, too late. Just like with Silas's compound, just like with my grandmother, just like with Mac. My vision dimmed at the edges as footsteps crunched through undergrowth, approaching the wreckage. A face appeared, the sheriff, peering in at me with cold detachment. "Where's the drive?" he demanded. I could only laugh, a wet, choking sound as blood filled my throat. The USB drive was already gone, mailed to Lawson's office that morning, a final precaution I'd taken without fully understanding why. My grandmother's paranoia, living on in me until the very end. The sheriff saw the truth in my eyes and cursed, raising his gun one final time. I closed my eyes, thinking of Chicago's skyline at sunset, of financial reports and deadlines that seemed so important once, of how I'd come to these mountains seeking peace, only to find that some legacies couldn't be escaped, some sins passed down through blood. The gunshot never came. Instead, there was a different shot, then another. The sheriff's body crumpled beside my car. More footsteps, urgent voices, hands reaching for me through twisted metal. "She's still alive. Get the medic." But I knew better. I could feel life leaving me with each shallow breath, each weakening heartbeat. As darkness closed in, I thought of my grandmother's words, written in her journal. These mountains have their own justice. They give and they take, and in the end, they keep what belongs to them. The mountains had claimed me, just as they had claimed her. And as consciousness slipped away, I understood the cruelest truth of all. I had never really escaped Chicago, never found the peace I sought. I had simply traded one prison for another, one set of chains for bloodier ones. The last sound I heard was the wail of approaching sirens, their promise of rescue nothing but a final, bitter lie. I'm Ansel Whitaker, 34 years old, and I moved to a cabin deep in the Kentucky woods near Mammoth Cave National Park to escape the grind. It's just me, my dog Rune, and a dream of living free. The cabin's rustic, with creaky floors and a wood stove I'm still learning to use. Rune's a scruffy mutt, loyal but skittish, always sniffing the air. I came here for peace, but the woods feel alive in a way that's hard to pin down. My nearest neighbor, Eloan Bryce, lives a mile off. She's a wiry 50-something who grows her own food and talks like she's seen things. I met her when I got lost hiking my first week. She warned me to stick to marked trails, said the woods keep secrets. I laughed it off, but her eyes didn't. The air here's thick with pine and damp earth. Mornings, I chop wood while Rune chases squirrels. It's quiet, but not silent. Birds, wind, the occasional far-off howl. I've got solar panels and a small garden, trying to live like Thoreau, you know? But the nights are heavy. The dark presses against the windows, and Rune sometimes growls at nothing. I tell myself it's just the isolation messing with me. City life made me soft, right? Still, I keep a shotgun by the door. Eloan gave me a carved wooden charm, said it's for protection. I hung it up to be polite, but it feels like a prop from a horror flick. I spend days exploring, mapping the woods in my head. The forest is dense, with sinkholes and caves that make the ground feel hollow. I found an old trail once, overgrown but deliberate, leading to a clearing with a stone pile. Looked like a grave, but I didn't poke around. I'm not that dumb. Rune hated it, hackles up, whining. I figured it was some pioneer relic and left it alone. Eloan asked me later if I'd seen anything odd out there. I mentioned the stones, and she went quiet, then changed the subject. It was weird, but I didn't press her. People out here keep to themselves. The routine's simple. Tend the garden, fix the cabin, read by lamplight. But I'm starting to notice things. Like how the woods go dead silent some nights. No crickets, nothing. It's unsettling, like the air's holding its breath. Rune's been acting off too, staring at the door like he sees something I don't. I joke that he's spooked by his own shadow, but it's not funny when I'm alone. Eloan stopped by once with homemade cider, and I asked if the woods ever feel wrong. She shrugged, said, "You'll get used to it." But her hands shook a little pouring the drink. I'm not paranoid, but I've started locking the door at night. The cabin's sturdy, built to last, but it's just wood and nails against whatever's out there. I keep thinking about Eloan's warning about the trails. She's lived here decades, so she knows the land. But why'd she clam up about that clearing? I'm probably overthinking it. Still, I check the locks twice now. Rune's my early warning system, but he's just a dog. I tell myself it's all in my head, that I'm not cut out for this life yet. But the woods don't care what I think. They're watching, and I can feel it. The first month flew by, and I'm settling in, sort of. I've got a rhythm. Coffee at dawn, work the land, hike with Rune. But the woods are starting to feel like a maze. I swear paths shift when I'm not looking. Last week, I found a scrap of cloth caught on a thorn near that stone pile. It was rough, dyed a deep red, not like anything I've seen. I stuffed it in my pocket and haven't told Eloan. She'd probably say it's nothing, but I'm not so sure. The woods are too quiet sometimes, and it's getting harder to shake the feeling I'm not alone out here. I've been reading up on Kentucky's history, caves, old settlements, weird folklore. There's stuff about hollers where people vanished, but it's probably just stories. Still, it's creepy how the locals talk around things. The guy at the gas station 20 miles out gave me a look when I mentioned living near the park. "Hope you're a light sleeper," he said, half smiling. I laughed, but it stuck with me. Rune's been digging near the cabin, kicking up dirt like he's after something. I don't know what's got him so worked up, but it's making me jumpy. Eloan invited me to her place for dinner soon. Said it's just stew, nothing fancy, but I'm looking forward to it. Maybe I'll ask her about the cloth, see if she knows anything. She's cagey, but she's the only one I trust out here. The woods are beautiful, don't get me wrong, but there's a weight to them, like they're waiting for me to screw up. I keep the shotgun cleaned, just in case. Rune's asleep by the fire now, but his ears twitch like he's dreaming of something bad. I hope it's just a dream. Yesterday, I hiked deeper than usual, past the stone pile, following a stream. The water was clear, but it smelled faintly of sulfur. I found a small cave mouth, barely big enough to crawl through. Rune wouldn't go near it, just stood there barking. I didn't go in. Caves collapse, and I'm not a spelunker. But there was something carved into a tree nearby, a symbol like a circle with spikes. It looked fresh, not weathered. I took a picture, but it's blurry. I'm starting to think Alohan's right about sticking to the trails. These woods are hiding something, and it's starting to feel personal. Dinner at Alohan's was last night, and I'm still rattled. Her cabin's a cluttered fortress, herbs drying, jars of preserves, a rifle over the hearth. The stew was good, venison and root vegetables, but the vibe was off. I brought up the red cloth I found, fishing for answers. Alohan froze, spoon halfway to her mouth, then said it was probably a hunter's marker. Her voice was too tight, like she was hiding something. I didn't push, but my gut's screaming she knows more. Rune stayed by the door, whining, which isn't like him. The whole night felt like a horror movie setup, you know? Like when the locals warn you, but won't spill the beans. Back home, I couldn't sleep. The woods were too quiet again, that eerie, no cricket hush. Rune paced, growling at the windows. I checked the locks, shotgun in hand, feeling like a paranoid idiot. Around 2 a.m., I saw a flicker through the trees, dim, like a lantern swinging. It vanished fast, but my heart was pounding. I told myself it was a hiker, maybe Alohan checking her land. But who hikes at that hour? I didn't go out. No way I'm chasing lights in the dark. I've seen enough scary movies to know that's a death wish. Still, it's eating at me. What's out there? I decided to lay low today, stick close to the cabin. Chopping wood, I kept glancing at the tree line. Rune's glued to my side, jumpier than ever. I found another weird thing while tending the garden. A small bone, maybe a rabbit's, half buried by the fence. It was carved with that same spiky circle I saw on the tree. My skin crawled. I bagged it in plastic and hid it in the shed. I'm not superstitious, but this feels disturbing, like someone's leaving me notes. I'm starting to think I should have stayed in the city, where the worst thing is bad traffic. Alohan stopped by unannounced this afternoon, which threw me. She brought a basket of apples, said they're from her orchard. I invited her in, hoping to pry more about the cloth or the symbol. She dodged every question, talking about weather and soil instead. When I mentioned the bone, her face went pale, and she mumbled something about old traditions before leaving fast. Traditions? What kind? My mind's racing with creepy possibilities. Cults, witches, you name it. I'm not laughing off her warnings anymore. Something's wrong out here. I'm torn about what to do. Part of me wants to hike back to that cave, see if there's more to find. But the smarter part says stay put, fortify the cabin. I've got enough food for weeks, but no phone signal. Nearest town's a half-day's drive. I nailed extra boards over the windows today, telling myself it's for storms. Rune's digging again, near where I found the bone. He's obsessed, and it's freaking me out. I keep picturing that lantern light, wondering if it was closer than I thought. The woods feel like they're closing in, and it's hard to shake the chill. I tried distracting myself with a book, but I keep rereading the same page. My head's full of what-ifs. Like, what if Alohan's in on whatever's happening? She's been here forever, knows every inch of these woods. But she's also helped me out, so maybe I'm being unfair. Still, her dodging my questions is a red flag. I checked the shotgun again, made sure it's loaded. I'm not a gun guy, but out here, it's my only backup. Rune's asleep now, but he keeps twitching, like he's chasing something in his dreams. I wish I could relax like that. The cloth and bone are locked in the shed, but I can't stop thinking about them. I sketched this symbol from memory, trying to make sense of it. It's not random. It's too precise, like a signature. I looked up local history online before I moved here, and there was nothing about cults or weird symbols. But Kentucky's got dark corners, right? Like those coal towns where people just disappeared. I'm starting to think this place has secrets Alohan's not sharing. I need to decide whether to confront her or keep digging on my own. I went for a short walk at dusk, sticking to my property line. The air felt heavy, like before a storm, but the sky was clear. Rune wouldn't leave the porch, which isn't like him. I found another scrap of red cloth tied to a branch, same dye, same rough weave. My stomach dropped. This wasn't here yesterday. Someone's been close, too close. I ripped it down, hands shaking, and burned it in the fire pit. I'm not sleeping tonight. I know that much. Every snap of a twig feels like a threat now, and the woods are way too alive. I'm starting to second-guess everything. Did I miss signs when I moved here? The realtor never mentioned anything creepy, just said the land was secluded. Secluded's one thing. This feels like a trap. I keep thinking about that cave, the symbol, the way Alohan's acting. My plan's to barricade the door tonight, keep Rune close, and figure out my next move. I could drive to town, ask around, but what if that makes things worse? I'm in over my head, and the horror of it sinking in. Something's out there, and it knows I'm here. I woke up to Rune barking like he'd lost his mind, claws scratching the door. It was 3 a.m., pitch black, and the air felt wrong. Thick, almost sour. I grabbed the shotgun, heart hammering, and peeked through a gap in the window boards. Nothing but trees, but Rune wouldn't quit. Then I heard it, a low chant, like voices weaving together, coming from the woods. Not loud, but close. Too close. My skin went cold. This wasn't a hiker or some drunk locals. It was deliberate, creepy as hell, like something out of a horror flick, but real. I whispered for Rune to hush, but he was shaking, ears pinned back. Whatever was out there, it wasn't just watching anymore. I stayed up, shotgun across my lap, listening. The chanting stopped after an hour, but the silence was worse. I kept thinking about that symbol, the cloth, the bone. It's like puzzle pieces I can't fit together. At dawn, I checked outside, half expecting to find footprints or some cliché horror sign. Nothing, just dew and Rune sniffing like crazy. But the air still smelled faintly of sulfur, like that stream by the cave. I'm not imagining this. I decided to hike to Alohan's, demand answers. She's got to know something. I packed a knife, water, and Rune's leash. The woods felt hostile, like every shadow was waiting to jump me. Alohan wasn't home. Her cabin was locked, curtains drawn, no smoke from the chimney. That's weird. She's always around. I knocked, called her name, but got nothing. Rune tugged me toward her garden, where I found a fresh patch of turned earth, like something was buried fast. My stomach twisted. I didn't dig, but I marked the spot in my head. On the way back, I saw another red cloth tied to a tree, this one with that spiky circle drawn in what looked like ash. It's official. This is terrifying. Someone's screwing with me, and Alohan's either involved or in trouble. Back at the cabin, I barricaded the door with a chair and checked the shed. The bone and cloth were still there, but the lock looked scratched, like someone tried prying it. My hands shook as I reinforced it with a chain. I'm not safe here. I keep replaying last night's chant. It wasn't English, maybe not even words, just this guttural hum that made my chest tight. I've heard about cults in Kentucky, like those backwoods groups from the 70s that got busted. But this feels older, more wrong. I'm starting to think the woods aren't just haunted, they're claimed. I tried the radio for news, anything to ground me. Static? Mostly, but I caught a snippet about a missing hiker near the park, a guy my age. The signal cut out before I got details. My mind's racing. Could he have seen something? Stumbled into whatever's out here? I'm kicking myself for not getting a satellite phone. I'm cut off, and it's sinking in how bad this could get. Rune's glued to me, growling at every creak. I keep the shotgun loaded, but it feels like a toy against whatever's brewing. The horror's real now, and I'm right in the middle of it. At dusk, I saw them. Figures in the trees, maybe 6, wearing rough red robes, faces hidden. They didn't move, just stood there, silent, maybe 50 yards out. My blood froze. I ducked below the window, clutching Rune to keep him quiet. My heart was pounding so loud I thought they'd hear it. They stayed for maybe 10 minutes, then melted into the dark. No footsteps, no sound. I'm freaking out, second-guessing every choice. Why'd I move here? Why didn't I listen to Alohan's warnings? This isn't just scary. It's like the woods are alive with something that hates me. I'm not sleeping tonight. I've got candles lit, not for light, but to feel less alone. The cabin's locked tight, but it's flimsy against whatever they are. I keep thinking about Alohan. Is she one of them? Did she set me up? Or is she hiding, scared like me? I found a note slipped under my door while I was out. Didn't see it till now. Just that spiky circle and one word. Leave. Written in red, smudged like blood. My hands are shaking typing this. I want to burn it, but it's proof something's happening. This is beyond disturbing now. I'm planning to scout the cave tomorrow. It's stupid, but it's where the clues point. Sulfur, symbols, that uneasy feeling. I'll bring the shotgun, Rune, and a flashlight. If I find answers, maybe I can figure out how to get out of this. If not, at least I'm doing something. Sitting here's driving me crazy. I keep hearing Alohan's voice in my head, saying the woods keep secrets. She wasn't kidding. I'm starting to think those secrets have teeth. The terror's sinking in, and I'm not sure I'm ready for what's next. I checked the cabin's perimeter before dark, looking for weak spots. Found another bone by the porch, same carvings, fresh dirt around it. I bagged it, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. It's like they're marking my territory, claiming it. I'm not religious, but I'm praying tonight, if only to feel less helpless. Rune's curled up by the fire, but his eyes are on the door. The woods are too quiet again, and I know they're out there, waiting. I don't know what they want, but it's not good. The horror's not just in my head anymore. It's real, and it's coming for me. I couldn't stay in the cabin another second. Those robed figures, that note. It was a death threat, plain and simple. I grabbed the shotgun, a backpack with water, a flashlight, and Rune's leash. My plan was to hike to the main road, flag down a car, and get the hell out. Dawn was breaking, gray and cold, as I slipped out the back door. Rune was shaking but silent, like he knew we were in deep. The woods felt alive, every branch snapped a warning. I stuck to the stream, hoping it'd lead me out, but the sulfur smell was stronger now, choking. My heart was racing, and the horror of those figures lingered like a bad dream. I kept low, praying they weren't watching. Half a mile in, I heard it, chanting again, faint but closing in. My stomach dropped. They were tracking me. I picked up the pace, Rune tugging ahead, but the woods seemed to twist, paths doubling back. It's like the forest was their ally. I tripped over a root, scraping my knee bloody, and cursed myself for not memorizing the trails. I thought about Aloan, wondering if she'd sold me out. No time for that now. I saw a flash of red through the trees, a robe, maybe 20 yards off. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just scary, it was a hunt, and I was the prey. I gripped the shotgun tighter, ready to fight. I ducked into a thicket, heart pounding, Rune pressed against me. The chanting stopped, but I heard rustling, too close. I peeked out and saw two figures, hoods up, holding what looked like curved blades. My mouth went dry. This was life and death, no question. I whispered to Rune to stay quiet, but he whimpered, and one of them turned toward us. I bolted, dragging Rune, branches tearing at my face. The stream was my only guide, but it led straight to that cave I'd found. No choice. I crawled inside, shotgun first, praying it wasn't a trap. The dark was suffocating, and the terror was crushing. Inside, the cave was tight, dripping with water that smelled like rot. Rune was freaking out, but I shushed him, flashlight shaking in my hand. The walls had those spiky circle carvings, dozens of them, some smeared with dark stains. Blood? I didn't want to know. I heard voices outside, low and guttural, searching. My mind raced, hide or keep moving. I pushed deeper, the tunnel narrowing, my claustrophobia screaming. Then I saw it, a chamber with a stone altar piled with bones. Human bones. My knees buckled. This wasn't just a sect, it was something evil, something that thrived on horror. I had to get out. I turned back, but the entrance was blocked. A figure stood there, silent, blade glinting. I fired the shotgun, the blast deafening in the cave. The figure dropped, but more were coming. I scrambled the other way, Rune barking wildly, and found a side tunnel. It was a gamble, but staying meant death. The walls closed in, scraping my shoulders, but I kept going, flashlight bouncing. I heard them behind me, their chants echoing like a nightmare. My lungs burned, and I kept thinking of those bones, wondering if I'd end up like them. The woods, the cave, it was all their domain, and I was running out of time. The tunnel spit me out near a sinkhole, the forest above quiet, but not safe. I climbed out, gasping, Rune trembling beside me. The main road was maybe a mile off. I could make it if I ran. But my pack was heavy, and my knee was throbbing. I ditched the bag, keeping only the shotgun and flashlight. Then I saw them again, red robes fanning out through the trees, moving like wolves. My heart sank. I sprinted, Rune at my heels, dodging roots and rocks. A blade whizzed past, embedding in a tree. This was it, run or die. The horror of being hunted was overwhelming, but I wasn't giving up yet. I hit a clearing, the road in sight, when I heard tires. A ranger's truck. I waved frantically, screaming, Rune barking like crazy. The truck stopped, and I collapsed against it, babbling about robes and blades. The ranger, a grizzled guy named Hollis, looked skeptical but let me and Rune climb in. As we sped off, I glanced back. Figures stood at the tree line, watching, not chasing. My chest tightened. I'd escaped, but it didn't feel like a win. Hollis asked what I'd seen, and I mumbled about hikers, too shaken to explain. The terror clung to me, and I knew they weren't done. Hollis dropped me at a motel in Cave City, 20 miles out. I paid cash, locked the door, and sat with Rune, shotgun by the bed. I kept replaying the cave, the altar, those blades. I was alive, but for how long? I tried calling the Lowen's landline, disconnected. My gut said she was gone, maybe dead. I wanted to tell Hollis everything, get the cops involved, but what proof did I have? A blurry photo, some bones in a bag. They'd think I was nuts. The woods had let me go, but I felt marked, like the sect's reach was longer than I knew. I wasn't safe yet. I couldn't sleep, my mind stuck on that altar. Who were they? What did they want? I kept the curtains shut, jumping at every noise. Rune was restless, sniffing the door like he sensed something. I told myself we'd head to Louisville tomorrow, disappear into a city where no one could find me. But deep down, I knew running might not be enough. The horror wasn't just the chase. It was knowing they were still out there, waiting. I checked the shotgun again, wondering if I'd ever feel safe. The woods had changed me, and the nightmare wasn't over. The motel room felt like a cage, but I was too wired to care. Rune slept fitfully, and I kept the TV on low, some infomercial droning to drown out my thoughts. I decided to write everything down, cave, robes, bones, before I forgot details. My hands shook as I scribbled, the horror of it all sinking deeper. Around 4 a.m., I heard a knock. Soft, deliberate. My heart stopped. Rune growled, hackles up. I grabbed the shotgun, crept to the peephole. Nothing but the empty parking lot. I told myself it was a drunk guest, but then I saw it. A red cloth tied to my truck's mirror, flapping in the wind. They'd found me. The terror was back, sharper than ever. I didn't wait for dawn. I threw my stuff in the truck, Rune in the passenger seat, and peeled out. Louisville was my goal, but the roads were dark, winding through hills that felt too much like the woods. My eyes kept darting to the rear view, expecting headlights or worse. I was so focused on escaping, I didn't notice the fog rolling in, thick, unnatural, like it was chasing me. My headlights barely cut through it. I should have pulled over, but panic kept my foot on the gas. That was my first mistake, thinking I could outrun whatever this was. The road felt alive, conspiring against me. The truck hit something hard. A thud, then a screech as I swerved, tires skidding. I stopped, heart pounding, and checked the road. Nothing, no animal, no debris. But the fog was thicker, and Rune was losing it, barking at the dark. I got back in, hands shaking, and saw a spiky circle scratched into the dashboard. It wasn't there before. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just a sect. It was something bigger, something that didn't need to chase me to win. I floored it, the horror of being marked overwhelming every rational thought. I just wanted to be free. I hit Louisville by sunrise, exhausted, pulling into a crowded diner to blend in. Rune stayed in the truck, and I ordered coffee, trying to look normal. The waitress, a kind older woman, asked if I was okay. I mumbled something about a rough night, but my eyes kept scanning the windows. That's when I saw her, Lowen, across the street, staring right at me. Same wiry frame, same hard eyes. My coffee cup slipped, shattering on the floor. I blinked, and she was gone. Was it her? Or was I losing it? The diner went quiet, everyone staring. The terror was eating me alive, and I didn't know what was real anymore. I decided to ditch the truck, too easy to track with that cloth. I rented a car, paid cash, and headed for a friend's place in Cincinnati. Rune was calmer, but I wasn't. Every mile, I expected something. Robes, blades, that fog. I kept my notes, thinking I'd mail them to a reporter, expose whatever this was. But I was sloppy, distracted. I stopped at a gas station, left the car unlocked for 2 minutes to pay. When I came back, my notes were gone, replaced with a single bone, carved with that damn symbol. My knees buckled. They were everywhere, and I'd never escape. Cincinnati felt safer, but I was a wreck. My friend, Theo, let me crash on his couch, no questions asked. I told him I'd had a bad trip, kept the truth locked up. That night, I dreamed of the cave, the altar, voices chanting my name. I woke up screaming, Rune licking my face. Theo was worried, but I brushed it off. I decided to stay one more day, then head west, start over. I should have left right then. That was my second mistake, thinking I could wait. The horror wasn't just in Kentucky. It had followed me, patient and cruel. The next morning, Theo went to work, and I walked Rune in his backyard. It was quiet, suburban, safe. Then I saw it. A red cloth tied to a fence post, fresh, like it had just been placed. My heart stopped. I grabbed Rune, ran inside, locked every door. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "You can't leave." No emojis, no name, just those words. I smashed the phone, grabbed the shotgun, and barricaded myself in Theo's room. The terror was absolute now, a weight I couldn't shake. I'd brought this to Theo's doorstep, and that guilt was worse than the fear. I decided to make a stand, tired of running. I loaded the shotgun, set traps with kitchen knives, anything to slow them down. Night fell, and the house went quiet. Too quiet, like the woods. Rune growled, staring at the back door. Then the power cut out. I heard chanting, low and close, seeping through the walls. My flashlight caught a shadow moving outside, then another. They were here. I fired through the window, glass shattering, but the chanting didn't stop. The door splintered, and red-robed figures poured in, blades gleaming. I shot again, but there were too many. Rune lunged, snarling, only to yelp and fall. My scream choked off as a blade found me. Theo found me the next day, barely alive, Rune gone. The house was trashed, no sign of the robes or blades, just blood and that spiky circle carved into the floor. I tried to explain, but the cops called it a break-in, said I was lucky to survive. I didn't feel lucky. Theo moved me to a hospital, but I knew the truth. I'd never be free. The sect wasn't just in the woods. It was everywhere, woven into the world's shadows. My mistake was thinking I could escape, that I could live off-grid and not pay a price. The horror took everything, Rune, my peace, my life. And somewhere, they're still chanting, waiting for the next fool to wander too far. I'm Tilda Morrow, 29 years old, and I've been living in a cabin near Daniel Boone National Forest for 6 months, chasing a quieter life. It's just me and my cat, Sable, a sleek black furball who's more hunter than pet. The cabin's a fixer-upper, leaky roof, drafty windows, but it's home. My only neighbor, Gideon Holt, is a gruff 60-something who keeps bees and lives a half-mile down the ridge. He helped me patch the roof once, said the forest tests folks. I thought he meant the weather. My days are simple. Tend my herb garden, sketch the landscape, feed Sable. But the nights? They're heavy, like the forest is holding its breath. It's creepy sometimes, but I'm stubborn. This is my fresh start. The forest is gorgeous, all rolling hills and sandstone cliffs, but it's wild. I've seen deer, foxes, even a bobcat once. Sable loves prowling the porch, batting at moths. I've got a generator for power and a well for water, so I'm mostly self-sufficient. Gideon's my lifeline, though he brings me honey and warns me about getting lost. Stay on the paths, he says, like it's a rule. I nod, but I wander anyway. The forest feels alive, not always in a good way. I keep a hatchet by the door, more for chopping wood than anything else. Still, it's comforting to have. I spend mornings sketching the cliffs, trying to capture their jagged edges. Sable naps nearby, lazy as ever. But last week, I found something odd while hiking. A rusted knife half buried in the dirt, handle wrapped in twine. Looked old, like something a hunter lost decades ago. I left it, but Sable hissed at the spot, tail puffed. I laughed it off, but it stuck with me. Gideon asked if I'd found anything strange when I saw him next. I mentioned the knife, and he got this look, like I'd said something wrong. He muttered about folks passing through, and left it at that. Weird, but he's old school. The routine keeps me grounded. Garden, sketch, cook, repeat. But the forest has a way of messing with you. Some nights, it's so quiet I can hear my own pulse. Sable's been acting off, staring at the windows like she sees something I don't. I tell myself it's just her being a cat, but it's unsettling. Gideon stopped by with honey yesterday, and I asked if the forest ever feels off. He shrugged, said, "Takes time to settle in." But his hands fidgeted, like he was holding back. I'm starting to think he knows something I don't, and it's got me on edge. I've been locking the door at night, more out of habit than fear. The cabin's solid, built from thick logs, but it's just me and Sable against whatever's out there. I keep thinking about Gideon's warnings, how he stresses the paths. He's lived here forever, so maybe he's just paranoid. But why'd he get weird about the knife? I'm probably reading too much into it. Still, I check the windows before bed. Sable's my alarm system, but she's no guard dog. I joke that she'd just nap through trouble, but it's less funny in the dark. The forest is beautiful, but it's starting to feel like it's watching me. I've been reading about the forest's history, old logging camps, moonshine stills, even some disappearances. Nothing recent, but it's creepy how the locals dodge questions. The clerk at the general store 15 miles out gave me a funny look when I said I lived up here. "Hope you're handy with that hatchet," she said, half laughing. I smiled, but it hit me wrong. Sable's been scratching at the door lately, like she wants to chase something. I don't let her out at night anymore. The forest's too big, too wild. I'm starting to feel like I'm not as alone as I thought. Gideon invited me to his place for coffee soon. Said he's got stories about the forest. If I'm curious, I'm definitely going, if only to figure out what's got him so cagey. The cabin's my sanctuary, but it's isolated. No phone signal, no internet unless I drive to town. I keep the hatchet sharp, just in case. Sable's asleep on the couch now, purring, but her ears twitch like she's hearing something. I hope it's just the wind. The forest is stunning, but there's a weight to it, like it's waiting for me to slip up. Yesterday, I hiked to an overlook, sketching the valley below. The air was crisp, but there was this faint smell, like burnt hair. Sable wouldn't leave my side, which isn't like her. I found a pile of rocks near the trail, stacked too neatly to be natural. Looked like a marker, but for what? I didn't touch it. Sable growled, low and steady, staring at the trees. I hustled back, feeling eyes on me the whole way. I'm not paranoid, but I'm starting to think Gideon's right about the forest testing me. It's got a horror to it I can't shake. I'm settling in, but it's not easy. The cabin's cozy, but the isolation's heavier than I expected. I keep finding excuses to stay inside, like the forest is daring me to step out. Gideon's coffee invite is tomorrow, and I'm hoping he'll open up. The knife, the rocks, Sable's weird behavior. It's all adding up, and not in a good way. I tell myself I'm tough, that I can handle this life. But the forest doesn't care. It's got its own rules, and I'm starting to feel like I'm breaking them without knowing how. Something's out there, and it's closer than I'd like. Coffee with Gideon was yesterday, and I'm still unsettled. His place is a cluttered mix of beehives and old tools, smelling of wax and smoke. He poured us mugs, strong and bitter, but his small talk felt forced. I brought up the rock pile I found, hoping he'd bite. He went stiff, said it was probably kids messing around, but his eyes darted to the window. Sable, who I'd brought along, stayed by the door, tail twitching. I pressed him about the knife too, and he snapped, "Stop poking at things, Tilda." It was harsh, not like him. The vibe was straight out of a horror movie, where the old guy knows the town's dark secret, but clams up. I left feeling more lost than before. Back at the cabin, I couldn't shake Gideon's warning. I locked the door, checked the windows, and kept the hatchet close. Sable was acting weird, pacing and hissing at the walls. Around midnight, I heard a scrape outside, like metal on wood. My heart jumped. I grabbed the flashlight, but the porch was empty. Just the wind, I told myself. But Sable's fur was puffed, and my gut said otherwise. I stayed up, listening, feeling like an idiot for not having a gun. I've seen enough scary movies to know noises aren't just nothing. The forest was too quiet, and it was creeping me out big time. Morning came, and I found the problem. A deep scratch on the cabin's back wall. Fresh, like someone dragged a blade across it. My stomach churned. This wasn't an animal. Too deliberate, too high up. Sable sniffed it and bolted inside. I'm no detective, but it felt like a warning, like someone was saying, "We see you." I thought about Gideon's reaction, wondering if he's involved or just scared. I decided to set up some basic traps, string with cans around the porch to make noise if anyone got close. I'm not paranoid, but this is getting disturbing, and I'm not taking chances. I hiked to Gideon's again, needing answers. He was outside, tending his bees, and looked annoyed when he saw me. I showed him a photo of the scratch on my phone, asked if he'd seen anything like it. He brushed it off, said it was probably a bear. A bear? With a blade? I called him out, and he got quiet, then said, "Some folks don't like new faces up here." My skin crawled. What folks? He wouldn't say more, just told me to stay inside at night. I left, pissed but spooked. The horror's starting to feel personal, like I'm a target. Back home, I doubled down on security. I nailed boards over the weaker windows, feeling like I was fortifying for a siege. Sable's glued to me now, not even chasing moths anymore. I found another weird thing while checking the traps, a small bundle of twine, like the knife's handle, tied in a loop and left on my porch. It wasn't there yesterday. My hands shook as I burned it in the fire pit. I'm starting to think someone's been watching me, maybe since I moved in. The forest feels like a trap, and I'm wondering if I made a huge mistake coming here. I'm torn on what to do. Part of me wants to pack up, drive to town, and never look back. But I've sunk everything into this cabin. Savings, time, dreams. Running feels like giving up. The other part says confront Gideon, force him to spill. He knows something, and I'm tired of his cryptic crap. I checked the hatchet, made sure it's sharp. I'm not a fighter, but I'm not helpless either. Sable's hissing at the door again, and it's giving me chills. The forest's too big, too dark, and I'm starting to feel like I'm not alone out here. I tried distracting myself with sketching, but my hands kept drawing that twine loop, like my brain stuck on it. I keep thinking about what Gideon said. Folks not liking new faces. Is it locals? Squatters? Something worse? I looked up the forest online last time I had signal, and there's old stories about drifters hiding out here, some not so friendly. Like that guy in the 90s who got caught stealing from cabins. But this feels different, more intentional. I'm kicking myself for not getting a dog instead of a cat. Sable's fierce, but she's no match for whatever's out there. I walked the property at dusk, staying close, hatchet in hand. The air was heavy, like a storm was coming, but the sky was clear. I found another scratch, this one on a tree by the well, same jagged line. My heart sank. They're circling me, marking my space. I tightened the traps, added more cans. I keep picturing someone out there, watching, waiting for me to screw up. Gideon's my only ally, but I'm not sure I trust him. The horror's sinking in, and I'm starting to think this isn't just about me being new. It's about what they want. I'm not sleeping tonight, I know that. I've got the hatchet by the bed, Sable curled up close. The traps are set, but they feel flimsy against whatever's out there. I keep replaying Gideon's words, the scratches, that twine. My plan's to stay put, keep the lights low, and figure out my next move. I could drive to town, but what if they follow? I'm in over my head, and the forest knows it. Something's coming, and it's not just a bad feeling anymore. The scary truth is, I don't know how to stop it, and it's getting closer every night. I woke to the cans rattling like crazy, a clatter that ripped me out of sleep. It was 2 a.m., dark as hell, and Sable was hissing, fur like a bottle brush. My heart was in my throat as I grabbed the hatchet, hands sweaty. The traps had worked. Someone was out there. I crept to the window, peering through a crack in the boards. Shadows moved on the porch, 3 or 4, hunched and quick. My blood froze. This wasn't a prank. It was a horror show, real and in my face. Sable darted under the bed, and I wanted to join her. The shapes didn't speak, just shuffled, testing the door. I held my breath, praying the lock would hold, but the terror was choking me. I stayed low, hatchet ready, listening. The shuffling stopped, but then came a low whistle, sharp and deliberate, like a signal. My skin crawled. I risked another look and saw them. Ragged figures in dirty jackets, faces hidden by hoods, one holding a blade like that rusted knife I'd found. They weren't locals or drifters. They moved like they owned the forest. I flashed back to Gideon's warning about folks not liking new faces. This was them, and they were here for me. The door rattled, a slow push against the lock. My mind screamed to do something, but my legs felt like jelly. This was scary as hell, and it was happening now. I decided to make noise, scare them off. I banged the hatchet on the table, yelling, "Get out, or I'll cut you." My voice cracked, but it worked. They scattered, melting into the trees. I waited, shaking, until dawn. When I checked outside, the traps were trashed, cans dented, string cut. Worse, they'd left something, a twine loop with a finger bone tied to it, right on my doorstep. My stomach heaved. This wasn't just a warning. It was a promise, something straight out of a nightmare. The horror was real, and I was in way over my head. I needed Gideon now. I hiked to his place, Sable in a carrier, hatchet in my belt. His cabin was quiet, no bees buzzing, which felt wrong. I knocked, but no answer. The door was ajar, and I pushed in, calling his name. The place was a mess, furniture tipped, honey jars smashed. My heart sank. Gideon was gone, and I found a smear of blood on the floor, fresh. My knees buckled. Was he dead? Taken? I grabbed a hunting knife from his table, feeling like I was stealing from a ghost. The forest was closing in, and the terror of being alone hit hard. I had to get back, figure out my next move. Back at the cabin, I barricaded the door with a chair and checked every window. Sable was freaking out, clawing the couch. I found another bone on the porch, same twine, same sick feeling. They'd been back while I was gone. My mind raced. Were they watching me right now? I thought about those old forest stories, drifters turning feral, living like animals. But this felt organized, cruel. I tried the radio, hoping for news, but got static. Then, a faint voice cut through, mentioning break-ins near the forest. It cut out, but it was enough to make my skin prickle. This was bigger than me. I saw them again at dusk, bolder now. For figures standing just beyond the tree line, knives glinting in the fading light. They didn't move, just stared, hoods hiding their faces. My chest tightened. I clutched the hatchet, whispering to Sable to stay quiet. They whistled again, that same sharp note, and one stepped forward, dragging something heavy. My flashlight caught it. A sack, stained dark, maybe blood. My stomach lurched. Was it Gideon? I didn't dare look longer. The horror was suffocating, like the forest itself was rooting for them. I was trapped, and they knew it. I decided to rig more defenses. I sharpened sticks, jammed them in the ground near the porch, and tied more cans. It felt pathetic, like fighting a tidal wave with a bucket. Sable's hissing kept me on edge, her eyes locked on the door. I found a note slipped under it, scratched on bark, just one word, tonight. My hand shook so bad I dropped it. This wasn't just scary, it was a death sentence. I thought about running, but the forest was theirs, and my truck was a half-mile hike through their territory. I was stuck, and the terror was eating me alive. I kept the lights off, hatchet and Gideon's knife close. The cabin felt like a coffin, every creak a threat. Sable was under the bed, growling low. I heard the whistle again, closer, then a thud against the wall. My heart stopped. They were testing me, wearing me down. I thought about Gideon, wondering if he'd fought or begged. My mind flashed to those bones. Were they his? Someone else's? The forest was hiding a slaughter, and I was next. The horror wasn't just them. It was knowing I'd walked into their world, and they'd never let me leave. I checked the traps one last time, finding another twine loop, this one with 2 bones. My hands shook as I burned it, the smoke stinging my eyes. I'm not sleeping tonight. I can't. The cabin's locked tight, but it's flimsy against them. I keep thinking about that sack, the blood, the way they move like they've done this before. My plan's to hold out till dawn, then make a break for the truck. But deep down, I know they're waiting. The forest is their ally, and I'm the intruder. The terror's real now, and it's not just at my door, it's already inside. The cabin wasn't safe anymore. Those whistles, that note, the bones. I had to run. I stuffed a backpack with water, Gideon's knife, and Sable in her carrier. The hatchet hung from my belt, my only defense. It was 3 a.m., the forest dead quiet, but I slipped out the back, heart pounding. Sable mewed softly, and I shushed her, praying they weren't watching. My truck was a half-mile off, parked by a trailhead. The path was dark, branches clawing my face, but I moved fast, fueled by terror. The forest felt alive, like it was guiding them to me. Every snap made me flinch, expecting a blade. This wasn't just scary, it was a horror I couldn't outrun, but I had to try. I heard the whistle again, sharp and close, maybe 20 yards back. My stomach dropped. They were tracking me, fast. I broke into a sprint, Sable's carrier banging my hip, the hatchet slipping in my sweaty grip. The trail twisted, and I stumbled into a ditch, scraping my hands raw. I cursed myself for not memorizing the route. A shadow moved ahead, a figure, knife raised. My blood froze. I swung the hatchet, missing, and ran the other way, heart hammering. The forest was their playground, and I was cornered. The horror of being hunted was crushing, but I kept moving, Sable's weight my only anchor. I ducked behind a boulder, gasping, Sable trembling in her carrier. The whistles multiplied, circling me. I counted at least 5 figures, their blades glinting in the moonlight. My mind raced, hide or fight. I clutched the hatchet, knowing it was useless against so many. Then I saw the creek, a faint shimmer through the trees. It led toward the trailhead, maybe my only shot. I bolted, splashing through icy water, the cold biting my legs. A blade whizzed past, grazing my arm, blood warm on my skin. The pain was sharp, but the terror was worse. I was running for my life, and they were closing in. The trailhead was in sight, my truck a rusted beacon. I fumbled for the keys, Sable yowling as I tore open the door. A figure lunged from the dark, knife slashing my backpack. I kicked hard, hearing a grunt, and scrambled inside, locking the doors. My hands shook as I started the engine, tires spinning in the dirt. Another figure appeared, slamming a blade into the hood, but I floored it, gravel flying. The truck fishtailed, but I was moving, headlights cutting through the dark. The horror clung to me, their whistles fading but not gone. I'd escaped, but it felt like a trap. I drove toward Slade, the nearest town, 15 miles out. Blood dripped from my arm, staining the seat, but I ignored it. Sable was quiet, curled tight in her carrier. I kept checking the rear view, expecting them to follow, but the road was empty. My mind replayed the knives, the sack, Gideon's blood. Were they after me because I was new? Or was it something else, something Gideon knew? I pulled into a gas station, lights harsh against the dawn. The clerk stared at my bloody arm, but I mumbled about a fall and bought bandages. The terror wasn't over. I felt marked, like they'd find me anywhere. I decided to crash at a motel in Slade, too shaken to drive farther. I locked the door, set Sable's carrier on the bed, and cleaned my arm, wincing at the gash. It needed stitches, but I couldn't face a hospital yet. I kept the hatchet close, jumping at every noise. Sable was spooked, hiding under the bed. I tried to piece it together, bones, twine, those figures. Were they squatters? A gang? Something worse? I thought about Gideon, wondering if he'd fought or run. The forest had swallowed him, and I'd barely escaped. The horror was in knowing they were still out there, waiting. I checked the truck before dawn, half expecting slashed tires or another bone. Nothing, just my blood on the seat. I decided to head to Lexington, lose myself in a city. But the gas station clerk's words stuck with me. He'd said, "Folks get lost up there," when I mentioned the forest. Did he know something? I didn't ask, too scared to dig. Sable was calmer, but I wasn't. Every shadow felt like a threat, every sound a whistle. I'd gotten away, but it didn't feel like freedom. The terror was deeper now, a weight I couldn't shake, and I knew they weren't done with me. I hit the road, keeping the radio off to listen for trouble. The forest loomed in my rear view, a dark mass that seemed to follow. I thought about reporting it, but what would I say? Hooded guys with knives chased me. I had no proof, just a cut and a freaked out cat. My plan was to hide out, maybe call a friend in Lexington, figure out what's next. But deep down, I knew running might not be enough. The horror wasn't just the chase. It was the feeling they'd planned this, that they'd always known I'd come. I gripped the wheel, praying I'd make it. I stopped at a diner outside Slade, needing coffee and a moment to breathe. Sable stayed in the truck, and I sat in a corner booth, eyes on the door. The waitress asked about my bandage, and I lied about a hiking accident. My hands shook as I sipped, replaying the night. I was alive, but for how long? I kept thinking about that sack, the blood, the way they moved like they'd done this before. The forest had let me go, but I felt cursed, like I'd carried something out with me. The terror was a shadow, and I was still in its grip, waiting for the next move. The diner was a blur, faces blending into noise. I scribbled notes on a napkin, knives, twine, whistles, trying to make sense of it. Sable was safe in the truck, but I felt exposed, like eyes were on me. Around noon, I saw something that stopped my heart. A twine loop on the diner's fence, a bone dangling from it. My coffee spilled, soaking the napkin. They'd followed me. The horror was relentless, a noose tightening. I paid fast, ignoring the waitress's stare, and ran to the truck. Sable hissed as I jumped in, tires screeching as I peeled out. I thought I'd escaped, but I was wrong, dead wrong. I drove toward Lexington, fog rolling in, thick and gray. My arm throbbed, blood seeping through the bandage. I was so focused on the road, I didn't see the spike strip until it was too late. The tires blew, truck lurching into a ditch. I hit my head, vision swimming, Sable yowling in her carrier. The fog was unnatural, swallowing the world. I grabbed the hatchet, kicked the door open, and stumbled out, Sable's carrier in one hand. Whistles cut through the fog, close and circling. My heart sank. This was my first mistake, thinking I could outrun them. The terror was absolute, and they'd planned it all. I ran, Sable's weight slowing me, the forest swallowing the road. My head pounded, blood trickling down my face. The whistles grew louder, footsteps crunching behind. I tripped, carrier slipping, Sable's yowl piercing the fog. A figure loomed, knife raised. I swung the hatchet, connecting with a sickening thud, but another grabbed me, pinning my arms. I screamed, kicking, but they were too many. Sable's carrier hit the ground, her hisses fading. The horror wasn't just dying. It was losing her, losing everything. They dragged me into the trees, the fog hiding their faces, but I knew they were smiling. They tied me to a tree, twine cutting my wrists. The fog cleared, revealing a clearing with a crude altar, bones, knives, bloodstains. My stomach heaved. This was their place, their ritual. A hooded figure stepped forward, holding Gideon's knife, its handle wrapped in twine. My heart broke. Was he one of them? Or just another victim? They whistled, a low chant, as the leader raised the knife. I screamed for Sable, for help, but the forest was silent. The terror was in knowing I'd walked into this, thinking I could live free. The knife gleamed, and I braced for the end, my life flashing in fragments. But they didn't kill me, not yet. They left me tied, vanishing into the fog. I struggled, twine tearing my skin, the cold sinking in. Hours passed, maybe days. My voice was gone, throat raw from screaming. Sable's carrier was empty when I finally broke free, her collar snagged on a root. My knees buckled, tears mixing with blood. I'd failed her. I stumbled to the road, waving down a trucker who called the cops. They found me half dead, babbling about knives and altars. The horror was losing Sable, but worse was knowing they'd let me live, for now. Lexington's hospital was sterile, safe, but I wasn't okay. The cops found my truck, but no altar, no bones, just my blood in the ditch. They called it a robbery gone wrong, but I knew better. I told a detective everything, showed him my sketches of the twine loops. He listened, but his eyes said crazy. My second mistake was thinking anyone would believe me. The terror followed me, in every shadow, every creak. I saw a twine loop outside my hospital window one night, swaying in the breeze. My heart stopped. They were still out there, watching, waiting for me to slip again. I moved to a friend's place in Cincinnati, hoping distance would save me. Lena, my friend, was kind, but I saw the worry in her eyes. I didn't tell her everything, just enough to explain the scars. I kept the hatchet by my bed, jumping at every noise. One night, I found a bone on Lena's porch, twine tied tight. My scream woke her, and I knew I'd brought the horror with me. I left the next day, no goodbye, heading west, always moving. The forest had marked me, and they'd never stop. The tragedy wasn't just Sable or Gideon. It was me, still running, never free. I'm in a nowhere motel now. No Sable, no peace. I write this down, hoping someone finds it, believes it. The forest hides them, protects them. They're not just drifters. There's something older, crueler, tied to the land. My mistake was thinking I could live off-grid, that the forest would let me. It didn't. It took everything, left me hollow. The horrors in knowing they're still out there, knives sharp, whistles low, waiting for the next one to wander too close. I hear them in my dreams, and sometimes, when it's quiet, I hear Sable's yowl, calling me back to the dark. I'll keep running, but I know the truth. You don't escape the forest. It's in me now, a scar deeper than the ones on my wrists. The cops, Lena, the world, they'll never understand. The tragedy is living with it, carrying the weight of what I saw, what I lost. The forest won, and I'm its ghost, haunting myself. If you find this, stay away from Daniel Boone. Burn this if you have to. Just don't go looking. The horror's real, and it's waiting, twine in hand, for you to make the same mistake I did. Finished. Did you like the story? Would you like to create another totally different horror story in Kentucky, perhaps focusing on scary animals or another cabin invasion, following the same guidelines? If you're good with it, just say, okay, continue, and I'll start a fresh story. If not, let me know with no, and we'll wrap up.